So with the current playoffs going on, and you may be a fan of a team that didn't make the playoffs and you're kind of getting FOMO right now. So for today's video, I wanted to talk about every single team that did not make the playoffs in 2024 and give a prediction on when they will make the playoffs next. So this will also include teams that were in the play-in tournament like the Bulls, Hawks, Kings, and Warriors, but they didn't make the full 8-team playoffs. So we're going to take into account where teams' current roster construction is. Do they have a lack of draft capital going forward? Do they have an aging roster? Do I have faith in that front office to actually enter a rebuild or make the right moves? And if you guys do enjoy this video, feel free to drop a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And let me know what you guys think in the comments below if I maybe overshot some years on some of these teams or undershot it. All right, so the first team I want to talk about is going to be the Detroit Pistons. And I'm going to predict that they will make the playoffs next in 2027. The Pistons won 14 games this year. Yeah, 14-68. They were the worst team in the NBA. And to be honest with you, I don't have much faith in Troy Weaver as decision maker of this team as the general manager. They paid Monty Williams to the largest contract in coaching history at the time they signed him last year. It was a disaster this season. Cade Cunningham showed some progress. Jaden Ivey, I don't really think showed as much as you would have liked. Same with Jalen Duren. Asor Thompson was a good defender to start off the year. And I liked what I saw in Marcus Sasser at times as well. I do think that this Detroit Pistons front office will spend this offseason because if they don't improve next year, this front office is going to be on the way out. They're going to fire them and bring in new guys. So I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs next year. I do think they could jump from like 14 wins to 28 to 30 next year because they should be a little bit more healthier. They're going to have another top pick in this draft. And like I said, they'll have some cap space. I don't know who they're going to throw a bag at, but I could see them being a little bit better next year, but still not make the play-in tournament, flirt with the play-in tournament in 2026, and then make the playoffs fully in 2027. Next up, we have the Washington Wizards, who were one game better than the Pistons this year. And I think they're going to finish with a playoff record next in 2028. Yeah, I'm sorry, Wizards fans. It's going to be another 4 seasons. I mean, this team is entering a rebuild, and they did the right thing when they traded away Bradley Beal last offseason. It did not work out for Phoenix this year as they were a first-round exit. They got swept by Minnesota, and I like what Washington is building right now. I like Bilal Coulibaly. I like Denny Avdia. I'm a big fan of Corey Kispert still, but I could see this team maybe moving on from Tyus Jones. They're not going to pay him in free agency. They traded away Daniel Gafford at the deadline last year. I think they're going to move Kyle Kuzma at one point as well, so I think this team could get worse this offseason and draft another guy in that top 10, develop this roster, and will probably be bad for the next couple of years. Now, obviously, some things can change. Maybe Bilal Coulibaly is going to take an Anthony Edwards level jump one day or something like that, and obviously that could fast track their next chance on making the playoffs. But for now, I'm going to be a little conservative with it, and I'm going to think that they are going to make the playoffs next in 2028. Yeah, not a lot of optimism for me in Washington going forward. All right, we have the Houston Rockets, a team that just missed out on the play-in tournament this year in the Western Conference. They went 41-41. I think they're going to make the playoffs next year in 2025. I think Ime Udoka was such a great hire for them. They were a bottom feeder in the Western Conference in the NBA, basically since the James Harden trade in the 2021 season, but they looked so much better this year. The veterans improved this roster like Dylan Brooks, like Fred VanVleet, and even at times Jock Landale. They traded for Steven Adams, who will be an upgrade over Landale next year behind Shane Goon. You're going to assume some more development from Shane Goon and Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore and Jabari Smith Jr. and hey, maybe even Jalen Green as well. We can get a full season from him like he was playing in March last year. And they are going to have a top 10 pick in this draft as well via the Brooklyn Nets from the James Harden trade. They also own those Nets picks going forward, so they're in position to make a trade this offseason if they wanted to. I like their young talent. They're continuing to get better. They were 41-41 last year. They have a good coach. I think they'll make the playoffs in 25. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the San Antonio Spurs. They went 22-60 this year, but what they have going for them is they've one of the best young players in the league in Victor Wembanyama. Wemby just had one of the best rookie seasons of all time, and this front office has been kind of okay. It's not really been the front office of the Spurs of old, at least throughout the 2010s. They still have a solid core of young players on the team like Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Malachi Branham, along with Victor Wembanyama. They're going to have their first round pick in this draft, which is going to be in the top 7. They also own the Raptors first round pick as well, and if it's outside the top 6, they're going to get it. So they have a potential 2 top picks in the top 10. And I think that this front office may want to fast track this Wemby development, right? Are they going to go out and trade for a Trae Young this offseason? And if not this offseason, it could be next offseason. So I think next year they can go from like 22 wins to maybe in the low 30s and then jump to a playoff spot in 26 because they also own those future Hawks and Bulls first round picks as well. And obviously having Victor Wembanyama helps out a ton. So I think they'll make the playoffs not next year, but the following year in 26. For the Portland Trailblazers, they were bad this year. They were the worst team in the Western Conference with a 21-61 record. They did the right thing and they traded away Damian Lillard last offseason, and I think they'll make the playoffs next in 2027, like the Detroit Pistons. But I do think they have a little bit more talent than the Washington Wizards. That's why I'm a little bit more optimistic with them. I think Scoot Henderson played really well in the final couple games of the season, so I think he's going to ride that momentum into year number 2. They're going to get a fully healthy Shaedon Sharpe back next year. They still have good veteran pieces that they can help develop the young core or trade this offseason, and Jeremy Grant, Malcolm Brogdon, DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams. They're going to have 2 auto picks in this draft as well. They own their first round pick and they own the Warriors first round pick, and I think they're going to be pretty bad next year, and they could land one of the big names in the 25 draft like a Cooper Flagg, an Ace Bailey, a Dylan Harper. So I think they're still going to be entering their rebuild, but I like the young core that they have, and they also have that draft capital as well from the Damian Lillard trade. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs next year or in 26. I think the 2027 range is when they can make it again. All right, this is one of the teams I am the least optimistic on, and it's going to be the Brooklyn Nets. 2028 for the Nets. The Nets just went 32-50. Yeah, 32-50. They were the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference, and this team was relatively healthy throughout the season compared to some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference. And what the Nets don't have in the short term is their own draft pick, so they can't tank next year to get Cooper Flagg. They don't own their first round pick. It goes to Houston. They have to try to win. This front office hasn't really made the best decisions since they traded away Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and obviously the James Harden trade has been a huge failure because Ben Simmons has been a negative asset for them. They're not going to be able to do much with cap space this offseason because Ben Simmons is still making $40 million a year. They could lose Nick Claxton. Who knows if they're going to move Mikal Bridges or not. Yes, they do have some picks from the Suns and the Sixers to maybe go out and try to trade for a Brandon Ingram or Donovan Mitchell or somebody like that, but I still don't think that this roster is good enough, and they need to enter into somewhat of a rebuild. It's tricky because they don't own their first round picks, so that's why I'm a little bit scared for the Nets. I think they could end up in the play-in tournament at times, but to actually make the playoffs as a top 8 seed, I don't think it's happening until 2028. Okay, the Atlanta Hawks are a tricky team. They finished with a 36-46 record this year. They were the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. They could have finished higher if Trae Young didn't get hurt throughout the year. The second season of the DeJounte Murray Trae Young experiment did not go well, but this Hawks team is still very talented. They have 2 solid centers in Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella. They have Jalen Johnson, who broke out last season. They also have DeAndre Hunter, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and still AJ Griffin as well. I know he had a good rookie season, not much of a sophomore year. Kobe Buffkin they took in the first round last year, and yeah, they have DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. They're gonna have another lottery pick as well. They have the Kings first round pick next season. They could be in line to make a move. It's tough though, because if they trade Trae Young, this is going to like 2028, 2029, but if they move DeJounte Murray, I think they could make the playoffs next year. So I'm gonna kind of go in the middle of things. I'm gonna say 2026. Maybe they're a little bit better next year. Maybe they flirt with a 500 record and then they make the playoffs in 2026, but they are a super hard team to evaluate right now because I have no idea what they're gonna do this offseason. The Raptors just went 25-57. Not a good year whatsoever, but I think they'll make the playoffs again in 2026. I don't think this team is going to win 20 more games next season than they did this season. I know they were tanking towards the end of the stretch, but if they lose out on their first round pick, if it ends up at 7 or 8, that is going to be a huge waste of a bad season for them. I do like the OG Anunoby for Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett trade. Both those guys will help them next year. Scotty Barnes was just an all-star. I like what I saw out of Grady Dick throughout the second half of the season. They still have Jakob Poeltl at the 5, and they have some draft capital as well to make some moves from the Pascal Siakam trade, but I don't think that this team will be in the playoffs next year. They could definitely flirt with the play-in tournament for sure, especially if they move up in the lottery and make a major move this offseason. So I think next year they could probably flirt maybe with the 500 record again, but then make the playoffs in 2026. It does help that they have Scotty Barnes, who was just an all-star this past season. The Jazz just went 31-51. They're also a super weird team to evaluate right now. I'm going to say 2026 is the next time they make the playoffs because they can go 2 ways here. They could make a big move this offseason and fast track this, and yeah, they could make the playoffs next year for sure. They have all that draft capital from the Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell trades. They could also just say, let's keep developing the young core. Let's keep Lauri Markkanen around. Maybe they sign him to an extension. They're going to have multiple first round picks in this draft. They have Taylor Hendricks developing from last year. Same with Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, Colin Sexton look great. You hope a bounce back season from Walker Kessler is in the mix next year. And maybe they flirt with a play-in tournament spot again. Then they make a big splash in the 2025 offseason, which is going to go into my 2026 prediction. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is if they end up moving Lauri Markkanen, they take another step back, and this could go to like 2028. For the Golden State Warriors, a team that was in the play-in tournament this year, a massive disappointment of a season, losing in the first leg of the play-in tournament to the Sacramento Kings. I think they do make the playoffs next year in 2024. Steph Curry isn't getting any younger. He doesn't have many years left in the league, so I do think that the Warriors front office is going to make a big splash this offseason to try to at least build somewhat of a contending roster around Steph before he retires. They have most of their draft picks outside of this season. They have Jonathan Kuminga, who's a really good trade asset as well. They have large contracts to match with other stars' values. Salary-wise, like an Andrew Wiggins or Draymond Green. They also have Moses Moody as well, Brandon Podziemski, who they just drafted. They could do somewhat of a sign and trade with Klay Thompson as well. I think they're going to make a big splash this offseason. They're obviously not going to enter into a rebuild with Steph, so I think they will make the playoffs next year, as long as Draymond does not get suspended anymore. As for Sacramento, I think they can make the playoffs next year as well. I'm going to go with a 2024 prediction. I do think that some teams in the West could fall out of the mix. I think New Orleans has a chance to not make the playoffs next year. Who knows what the Lakers and the Suns are going to be doing this offseason. Hey, the Clippers could even take a step back next year with their aging roster. So I think this Kings team, who now know that maybe last year was a flash in the pan, they were a relatively healthy team, and that's why they were the 3 seed. Malik Monk is a free agent this offseason. They will have some big question marks, but they are going to have their lottery first-round pick. They also own most of their draft capital going forward, so they could look to make a big splash. They have Sabonis, they have Fox. Keegan Murray looks great as a young player still. Keon Ellis was fantastic this year, and Kevin Huerter really can't be any worse. So I think Sacramento is in play to make a big move this offseason, and I do think that the next time the Warriors and the Kings make the playoffs is next year. For the Chicago Bulls, 2028. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bulls fans, that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but I kind of hope it is for you guys, because if you make the playoffs next year, that probably means you didn't move Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, and you are probably going to end up as a 7th or 8th seed and get bounced in round 1. So I think hearing 2028 is okay. That means you guys entered into a proper rebuild. You move Zach LaVine eventually. You move Alex Caruso. Hey, maybe you can even move Nikola Vucevic. You absolutely do not re-sign DeRozan this offseason. You keep developing Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu. You're going to draft hopefully a wing or a big with your first round pick this year, and you do what should have probably happened a few seasons ago. You enter into a proper rebuild. Get out of NBA purgatory. This is the worst spot to be in. You're too good to have a top pick in the draft, but you're too bad to really do anything in the playing tournament or the playoffs as a whole. I know DeRozan has been great for you guys, but I do think it's time for a new era in Chicago. Let's talk about a team that I think may be the most lock out of all these teams to make the playoffs next season, and that's the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, the Grizzlies were just decimated with injuries this year. That's why they were so bad. Ja was suspended and then pretty much was out for the whole season when he came back. Triple J dealt with injuries. Desmond Bane dealt with injuries. Same with their newly acquired acquisition last offseason, Marcus Smart as well. Steven Adams was out from the year from the get-go. Brandon Clark was injured. This team had so many different injuries this year, and we saw almost 30 different Grizzlies. They're going to get all these guys healthy next year besides Steven Adams. They have the emergence of G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams. They're going to have a top 10 pick in the 2024 draft. I think the Grizzlies are a lock to make the playoffs in the 2025 season as long as they are fully healthy, and maybe they even have a big move to make this offseason as well. And lastly, we have the Charlotte Hornets. I do not think that they make the playoffs next season, but I do think that they will make it in 2026. But the big question for them is, when will LaMelo Ball stay healthy for a full season? The one time we did see a fully healthy year for him, they were in the play-in tournament. Now you add Brandon Miller into the mix, you're going to add another top 7 pick in this draft. They have also draft capital going forward that they could use in a trade or just to draft players from the Rozier, Gordon Hayward, and PJ Washington trades. Mark Williams still looks like a really good young big in this league. I still have a lot of hope for Nick Smith Jr. as well. So I don't think Charlotte is going to make the playoffs next year, but with a new coach, new front office as well, it's exciting. It's hopefully a new era in Charlotte, and I do believe that they can make the playoffs in 2026 quicker than the Detroit Pistons. So yeah, that is going to be it for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. It was a fun concept and exercise to do, so let me know what you agree with or disagree with in the comments below. But I think there's going to be massive moves this offseason as well, with disappointing playoff exits like the LA Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. They could be in position to maybe sell off some of their stars or go all in next year, and you never know with Milwaukee or the Clippers or the Sixers as well. You have big time free agents like Donovan Mitchell and Brandon Ingram in 2025, so those guys could get traded as well, and then you have no idea what Golden State, Chicago, or Atlanta can do. So it's going to be a massive offseason with NBA moves, so make sure you're subscribed. Drop a like if you guys did enjoy the video. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of it, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.